I am NetMoverSitan. Welcome to the lore section on Ordeals, that which was first hinted at by Malkuth. This one should be interesting. What are ordeals? They can be as varied as they are dangerous, especially for the uninitiated. They can't be prevented, just overcome. They start to appear from day 6 onwards, after a certain amount of work has been performed in the day. A warning of that time, the time of when it will appear, will be displayed when a number of crop-off meltdowns that will occur will be identified by color and time. Unlike abnormalities, ordeals can't be locked in containment rooms, or units, or whatever you want to call them. They instead float around the facility, showing up from time to time. The entities will not attack others of its kind. They don't attack their own, any more than agents attack other agents, at least under normal circumstances. They will happen in this order, where only one kind of ordeal can appear each time. There are 4 times. This order goes by the day as it goes on. Dawn, noon, dusk, and midnight. A certain amount of work, as stated, must be started for them to appear. Ordeal types are classified by colors, and their risk level is based on the time of day that they appear, with dawn being the easiest, and with midnight being the most dangerous. Ordeals of the same color type are different in each time, different in terms of how dangerous they are. There are 6 types of ordeals known. They certainly can't be confused for each other. Not easily, anyway. As if the facility doesn't have enough to deal with, without them appearing. I'd best get on with it, shouldn't I? Before you become an ordeal for me to deal with. And I've got plenty to use against those that stand against me. Amber ordeals have a food-related theme, with worm-like creatures. Weak individually, and strong in swarms. They try to overwhelm lone employees while dealing more damage. A loud noise, presumably them digging through, can be heard when this ordeal starts. Cockroaches are the least of the facility's pest control problems. This place has these. Crimson ordeals have a carnival theme. Their main entities are twisted clowns of different aspects. Their main feature is triggering damage or abilities after their deaths, such as exploding when killed. A carnival theme is played when this ordeal starts, although thankfully neither Pennywise or the Joker are among them, If they were, the facility would be well and truly. Yeah, it would. I mean, would you want either of them to deal with? Because, let's face it, I highly doubt that there's anyone with a bat fetish in that city. Or what we would recognize as law enforcement. Gotham City has nothing on this city. The green ordeals have an ancient mechanical theme. Enemies focus solely on killing. With a variety of weapons at their disposal, foghorns can be heard when this ordeal starts. Possibly crude inventions made in the backstreets that went rogue. The indigo ordeals have a modern industrial/war theme. The sound of steam being vented can be heard when this ordeal starts. What this involved was mentioned a few times, but we'll cover this later in this video. The violet ordeals have a religious theme with ancestral entities. Yeah, eldritch horrors of a different kind. Parts of them being limbs or appendages like arms. They take advantage of rooms in the facility, usually as static threats that limit locations. An eerie sound can be heard when this ordeal starts. Oh, do not get me started on this one. Don't worry, that's coming. The white ordeals. I'll save this for the mercenaries lore section, as it's quite relevant for that. Yeah, it has some late game spoilers. That's all I can say about it. These are the 6 kind of ordeals. As previously mentioned, one is more specific for late game, while one of them only appears at noon. And has quite specific behaviors. The dawn ordeal is the first to appear in the day. The events in this aren't very difficult with basic preparation, and won't bring much trouble if taken care of quickly. Defeating a dawn ordeal will grant 10% of energy for the energy quota. The Amber Dawn, also known as complete food, when this event starts, the message will appear. Complete food, perfect substitute material. And brown worm-like creatures with teeth at the front will appear in groups in one hallway with containment units, 1 per department. When a target is in this room, they will leap towards it when close enough, dealing around 2 red damage per hit. The worms will remain in the hallway for a while, but will eventually burrow into the ground and move to another random hallway in the facility. The worms receive double red and pale damage, but normal for black and white. Weak employees won't last long, especially melee combatants. Ranged combatants fare better against them, especially in numbers. Although melee combatants could be used as bait to keep them still long enough for the ranged combatants to actually hit their target without them being targets themselves. Sounds pretty basic so far. That's the point. It's just letting the manager into it easily. Partly because the agents at this point won't exactly be at their best, or at their best equipped. Not many will have either training or lob points invested into HP, or more specifically, what grants HP. And this is just one kind of dawn ordeal. There are others. Others that might provide more of a challenge and more of an irritation. The Crimson Dawn, also known as Cheers for the Start. When this event starts, a message will appear. A message saying, "Let's make a stronger fire in a life like a candle that will someday end." And small humanoid clowns with grinning faces, hats, and thin limbs will spawn. They randomly appear in a hallway that has a containment unit, spawning a single clown per department. They move a bit faster than the average employee, and are not aggressive towards employees. Their objective is reaching the containment units. Why would they go for the containment units, you may ask? Well, there's a good reason for that. They're thieves! Once they reach a containment unit, they will stop in front of it and start to make a channeling animation for a while. After some time has passed, they will disappear from their current location in a small smoke cloud, stealing 20% of unique PE boxes from the previous containment unit. And if the previous containment unit had a quick-off counter, it will be dropped by 1, resulting in potential irritation. After disappearing, the clan will appear in another hallway, and repeat their mischief until suppressed. Chopping off their hands will be easy mode compared to what I want to do with those thieves. Yeah, I'm starting to think that the Arabs had the right idea in that regard. Upon death, they will explode, dealing around 4 red damage in a short range. Pale damage is best to take care of them, but black and white will also work well, just not as well. Red, they have a slight resistance to this. The clowns tend to appear 1 per hallway, per department, although more than 1 can appear per department sometimes. Due to their ability to steal PE boxes, they can make research of an abnormality slower, slowing progress. And they can also reduce the ability to create equipment from those abnormalities. And because of their ability to subtract from the equip-off counter, that can lead to abnormalities triggering their abilities, or breaching. It is important to kill them as soon as they appear. Agents should be placed in the hallways before the event occurs, just to be sure that dangerous abnormalities aren't released or triggered due to the way that the clowns behave. Although the clowns waste their time by stopping in front of tool abnormalities, those that neither have PE boxes or quick-off counters. So, if it could be afforded, it's unnecessary to deal with them immediately. Although, it couldn't hurt to do so, because it would mean that they wouldn't risk doing the same with other abnormalities after. It's good to have an abnormality that allows for the training of fortitude, because it would help with being able to take the beating. While this one is more an annoyance than anything, what's next is more of a threat, due to it actively hunting those within the facility. Oh yes. This one actually causes damage actively. And that is... well, I think it's obvious, but I'll just say it. It's the Green Dawn Ordeal, also known as Doubt. When this event starts, the message, "One day we got a question. Where did we come from? Received a life to someone and left unattended irresponsibly." And humanoid robots with red eyes, armed with a lance filled with gears and wearing an old cloth, will appear in the facility. So basically, they're steampunk Terminators. One will appear in each unlocked department, in a random hallway or small room. They move slowly, and they are hostile to employees. They will attack employees once near, dealing between 3 to 6 red damage with a moderate attack speed. When dealing a killing blow to an employee, it will perform another movement during this, overkilling the employee by stabbing them with a lance several times, which deals between 3 and 6 white damage in quick succession to all other employees in the same room. The final hit can cause 10 white damage to the nearby employees. As for what to use against them, black damage is best, but white damage is also acceptable. Pale damage is normal, but red, there's resistance to that. The robots will appear in different locations each time, and will kill clerks quickly by their simple attacks and the overkill move. A lone robot can be overwhelmed and defeated easily by using employees with different weapons. It's best not to send any employees to suppress them when these enemies are about to kill another employee, largely to avoid the white damage dealt. As, well, not all have good SP. That requires some decent prudence training, and also protection. The Violet Dawn, otherwise known as the Fruit of Understanding, when this event starts, crawling, spherical, organ-like creatures spawn in the facility, one per department in different hallways. They have an average amount of HP and low movement speed, moving around where they appear, usually staying in the same location. They constantly glow, dealing low black damage to any around itself. And if they aren't suppressed after a period of time, they will expire, letting out a big glow. This glow will drop the Kripov counters of all the abnormalities in the same department to 0. and inflict average white damage to all the employees in the department. So it's best to take this moving pustule down before chaos ensues, especially early on, when agents are less capable of coping with it. Oh yes. An annoyance, but it can easily be day-ending. The message that appears is to understand what is beyond comprehension. They see and dreaming. White damage is the best against it. It has no significant weaknesses besides that. These creatures don't stand much of a chance in battle against a group of employees, but their glow after self-termination. That's the biggest threat. If the employees are distributed well to fight off these beings, they can be taken care of quickly. The day progresses and noon is here. Noon is the second time to appear in the day. The events in this time are more difficult, and not paying much attention to them might lead to severe problems. Although defeating a noon ordeal will grant 50% of energy to the energy quota. Yes, slightly more, but it's slightly more threatening. The Crimson Noon, otherwise known as the Harmony of the Skin. When this event starts, a message appears. We march every time and share our joy. Followed by a big quadrupedal clown entity made of red flesh with tumours, and faces will appear. It possesses 3 heads, all with clown makeup, black hair and hollow eyes, with one being at the back, holding in its mouth a big organ-like part, with a spike coming out of it, and the other 2 in front. Did they encounter a cursed French puzzle box? Anyway, the clown wanders through the facility at a slightly quicker speed than average employees. It possesses high HP and slow attack speed. It only engages in battle at close range, biting or smashing its head towards a target to deal average red damage. If this is defeated, it will spawn 3 smaller versions of itself. The Crimson Dawn, in 3 different hallways. Yeah, and we know how those are dealt with. Just check earlier if you want to get the specific details on that. Best not to focus all the employees in one place, otherwise quite a few problems will occur. As previously stated, with the Crimson Dawns. Pale damage is best against this, but black and white damage is also good against it. Red is endured by it. And guess what? This is supposedly the easiest noon event. If this event occurs, the single entity will take time to roam across the place, regularly stopping to attack clerks, which takes 3 or 4 hits to kill. By the time these appear, the manager should possess agents with enough defenses and HP to resist them. It's not always recommended to terminate it, since this will spawn minor clowns in random hallways that can steal PE boxes and reduce the quip-off counters. Sometimes avoiding it is the best choice, as it is fairly easy to avoid, and the damage isn't major if the day can be finished without killing it. Yeah, it's clear that the ordeals will get progressively worse. Then we have the Green Noon, otherwise known as Process of Understanding. When this event starts, the message will appear saying, "They eventually bounded in life. We were only to throw out despair and anger." And golem-like mechanical beings, with one arm being a saw and the other being a gun, will spawn in random hallways of the facility. One per department. Honestly, they'd be more effective if they were armed with an industrial egg whisk and a sink plunger. Those homicidal wheelie bins have set their standards lower. Anyway, they may have slow movement speed, but they have a large amount of HP, and their guns are always firing when not in close range, quickly dealing 2 damage per second to the first target in their path. When they get into close range against another target, however, they will use their saw instead to deal multiple quick hits of 1 to 2 red damage in quick succession, quickly decreasing the HP gauges of most targets. Both of their attacks can slow the targets for a moment. Sometimes they will stop in place and become compact, not attacking during this state, being open to other attacks from those that can. They will crumble into pieces after defeated. They're especially vulnerable to black damage. White also works well. Pale has no significance, while red it's more resistant to. Yeah. You might be thinking, it stops attacking? Yeah. It has a vulnerable state, which... that says something, doesn't it? It says that they weren't particularly well made. Either that or... if they were better when they were first made, they've certainly become less reliable as they've continued on. Not the most energy efficient, are they? But they shouldn't be taken lightly, as hopefully by the time these are fought, the red damage shield is available. Alternatively, they could just retreat and, well, wait until HP recovers, while keeping at least one step ahead of the, well, like Doubts. This ordeal focuses on killing the employees, taking advantage of long rooms like hallways, due to their guns always firing in the front line. Well, in a straight line in front of them. Yes, that sounds better. It's better to take them out with large groups of agents with different ranged weapons, with one taking the main advantage at melee attacks. But when this ordeal is inactive, it's best to take advantage of that if it's close enough. But if none of the spawned enemies of this ordeal type are engaging agents in battle, it's possible to ignore this event and end the day. But I wouldn't recommend that, as it would require a good amount of abnormality training time to be skipped past, and that's something that can be useful later. In fact, it is useful. It means that tougher threats can be dealt with easier, and with a less risk of those agents dying. Let's move on to the next ordeal. The Indigo Noon, also known as a sweeper. This ordeal only appears from day 26 onward. When the event starts, the message, when the night falls in the back street, they will come. And a group of humanoid beings wearing metallic armor that covers their whole body will spawn. They have red eyes or visors, gas masks, hook hands, and tanks on their backs. Their faces might be different. They appear around the facility in groups of 3, spawning around 4 groups in different hallways. They are the cannibalistic figures of terror that feast on those in the back streets and the outskirts. They will seek out employees, attacking them with their hooks, inflicting average black damage, and they will eat from the corpse if they find any. They're weak to white damage, strong against pale, and stronger against black. It's best to use execution bullets to clear the corpses if they get too close to them. If they gather around to attack a single agent, there's not much they can do. So, as usual, it's best to attack in force. As for the confusion between sweepers and cleaners, they might be the same, just with interchangeable terms. Then again, they might be different. Hard to tell, as there's not much info other than they feast on the dead, and also make them dead so that they can be feasted on. Yeah. Anyone get the feeling that cannibalism is a hobby to some in that city? And just outside it when other sources of food are unavailable. Yeah, it's a good idea to get a black shield on as many agents as possible. Next we have the Violet Noon, also known as Great Love for Us. When this event starts, a message will appear saying, "Only weak actions were heard to us, and we sought mercy and love for them." And then dark purple portals will appear on the ceiling of the rooms, except the hallways and small rooms. And large, dark, stone-like monoliths will fall from them, landing on the floor and dealing a huge amount of red damage, capable of killing almost any employee that they land on. After dealing, they spread dark tentacles and start to constantly deal 1 black damage to nearby employees at average intervals of time. The power of hentai threatens the facility through their monoliths. The entities aren't suppressed by just letting them do their thing. Because if they aren't suppressed after a long period of time, they will hide their tentacles and start to glow for a time. And after their charge, they will make a grip-off counter of a random abnormality in the facility drop by 1, and then resume their attacks. Seriously? First there's anime come to life and now there's hentai? What's wrong with these people? Then again, what they find entertaining in between their work hours, not really my concern. Well, it's surprising considering where they're from. Yes, black damage is multiplied by 2. Pale does normal, and it has a resistance to both red and white. The chance of this event occurring might be a bit lower than most. It can cause major damage to any that they come across. Moving the employees to the elevators closest to hallways before the event will help to avoid any casualties. The suppression isn't that hard, as long as preparation is made. They can also decrease the grip-off counter. Next we have the Dusk Ordeals. Dusk is the 3rd time to appear in the day. These ordeals are difficult events that try to disrupt the order of the facility very quickly. This is the last one to trigger before the Midnight Ordeals. Defeating a Dusk Ordeal will grant 20% of the energy quota. First we have Amber Dusk, also known as Food Chain. When this event starts, the message, "Getting to know its taste was an unavoidable process," will appear. And a huge brown worm-like creature with teeth at the front, with different orange tumours on their body, will appear in the hallways. Those with containment units, 1 per department. Seriously, where are the Klingons when you need them? These worms spawn at one side of the hallways, moving slowly to the opposite side. They deal around 35 red damage to targets in front of them, rapidly, and if it reaches the opposite side of the room, it will start to spawn smaller worms, as in Amber Dawn Ordeals. These worms will follow the Amber Dusks and roam the hallways, just as they did in the Amber Dawns. Once the Amber Dusks go to the other side, they will burrow and appear in another random hallway in the facility. The big worm will only spawn minor worms when there are less than 3 minor worms alive. Otherwise, they just burrow. They're weakest against pale. Weak to black and red, but more resistant to white. At the start, the big worms will appear alone. But once they reach the other side, that's when the minor worms are spawned. Defeating them is a dangerous task without proper HP and red resistance. The big worms should be defeated first to avoid them spawning more of the smaller ones. Oh yes, and it is possible to kill some of the larger worms before they can spawn them. Next we have Crimson Dusk, also known as Struggle of the Peak. When this event starts, a message will appear saying, "Abandon the old body and become all one, and continue the Red Carnival constantly." And then two big round flesh creatures appearing in random chosen hallways will be a problem for the facility. Multiple chunks of flesh sewed together, with multiple upper limbs as arms, holding a hammer, a cleaver, and a spear. On the middle of its body it has a hole in it, with two small eyes on top, and with the head of a clown coming out of the hole. So it's basically a deformed fusion of Bonkers from the Kirby series, as in the series with a deceptively cute pink demon that devours all he can with his black hole stomach, and Donkey Kong, a tie-wearing gorilla. The amalgamation clans will roll through the facility rooms, dealing around 10 red damage to employees in its path. It will stop randomly, near the entrance to another room or elevator, taking its time to recover. If employees are near it before it starts to roll again, at melee range the clown will use its weapons, dealing average red damage. And when the clown is defeated, this entity will explode in a burst of blood, spawning harmonies of the skin. It's weak to pale, but resistant to everything else, red especially. And when the Crimson Noons, the harmony of the skin, are defeated, Crimson Dawns will appear, 3 each. Yes, it is an escalation. First we have the Crimson Dusk, and when they're killed, we have Crimson Noons, and then a few Crimson Dawns. They can be managed to minimize the risk to the facility. When the Crimson Dusks are defeated, the Crimson Noons can have the agents can be split up, so that they can be moved to wherever they're needed. And then the Crimson Dawns can be dealt with accordingly. They just need to be divided to where they're required. As by the point that the Crimson Dusks appear, not all of the agents need to be in one place. Certainly not with the weapons they're armed at that point. Next we have Green Dusk, also known as Where to Reach. When this event starts, the message, "They set up a far-high tower to go where they came," appears, and 4 square metallic structures will appear in hallways of the facility, 1 per department. They stand idle for a moment before becoming active. They have high HP and are unmovable and don't have any attacks on their own. And when they activate, they start up a small bar besides them, with machinery starting up, and once that bar is charged, it will open a side of its structure and let out an amount of 1 or 2 doubt robots and 1 or 2 process of understanding robots. So it's basically like a structure in a real-time strategy game making units. Except in this case it makes them all at once. After spawning them, it will enter into a cooldown mode and become idle. The robots will proceed with their usual behavior and don't damage each other. When a certain amount of robots are defeated on their respective machine that they came from, it will reactivate itself and reload until spawning the amount of robots that were destroyed. And will continue with this until the Amber Dusk itself is destroyed. No simple task, I might add, considering how durable they are. And their defenders are also a problem. Quite a few of them. Early on, Diefreischutz was useful in at least damaging them. It's vulnerable to black damage and resistant to red damage. This ordeal was a great challenge due to the robots that it spawned, or rather made. They can be taken out faster if there are no other threats around, though, where it's better to avoid contact with the attacking robots due to them being respawning if enough of them are killed. But once the Green Dusk, rather, is defeated, well, there's no more being made from them. And then all that matters is to destroy the robots. Midnight is the last and strongest time to appear in the day. This time is the last part of the Griffith meltdown, or at least close. After all of the other times have passed, these events are the most dangerous of that which the facility has to deal with. Meant to end in a game over if it goes badly wrong. These are rarely seen by the manager because of how far in the Griffith meltdown they're at. Level 8 or higher. Defeating this will grant 25% of the energy of the quota. First is the Ordeal of Amber Midnight, also known as Eternal Meal. When this event starts, the message, they fought to eat each other, appears. The ground will shake, and dust will rise in 2 of the main rooms of the facility. And then a giant worm covered with an armor of rocks and earth, with rocky teeth and with several big lumps on some parts of them, will rise from the floor where the ground was shaking, and eat those unfortunate enough to be in those rooms at that time. It doesn't attack, and has high HP otherwise, and overall decent defenses, straight out of the imagination of Frank Herbert after eating a load of gorgonzola before going to bed. The problem is what it does after a time. Well, after some time idle, it will spawn Amber Dusks. Yes, that's what the Amber Midnight does. The worms will act like usual, but will start to move from, to the sides of the main room, and once reaching them, will burrow and go into other hallways. And, as before, they'll spawn smaller worms of the Amber Dawn variety. They will follow the basic behavior like in other ordeals. There is also a limit on how many Amber Dusk worms can be spawned, and once the limit is reached, none more can be spawned. It's resistant to all damage except red, which does normal damage to it. But that shouldn't stop those that fight this Amber Midnight. doing a well-known South Korean real-time strategy move, as in a move done by those from South Korea in a certain real-time strategy game, involving a race of fictional insects, with the word rush involved. Yeah, it's that one. This ordeal is actually the easiest to deal with of the midnight ordeals. It is overall predictable. The high amount of red damage dealt with the giant worms emerging can be avoided, and they can be easily swarmed if the agents are gathered. A large group can get rid of the amber dusk worms and the amber dawn worms without too much stress, and they will sometimes even take themselves out when the main worms are killed. Although, unlike the other two midnight ordeals, weak agents don't really need to be micromanaged to survive, as they're completely safe if they're in the elevators. Next we have the Green Midnight, also known as Last Helix. When this event starts, a message will appear saying the tower is touched by the sky and nothing will remain on the ground. And then a huge metallic structure will appear around the information team main room. And then it will start to open, revealing its machinery for the real attack. The real struggle begins when, after some setup time, 2 green lasers are deployed from the structure. The first laser always pointing upwards, and the second laser moving in a clockwise direction at a slow speed. Both lasers going in a straight line, crossing the whole facility and reaching farther away than the visible map. Everyone and anything that is caught in any of the lasers will suffer a quick succession of black damage hits, enough to break shields and liquefy any employee unfortunate enough to die by it. Low-level employees, they've pretty much had it. However, if White Knight appears in either the information or control departments, and this ordeal appears, it means he gets a death beam right up his feathered yeah! The structure can be suppressed, however, but it has a drastic amount of HP. After some amount of damage done, the structure will malfunction for a short moment, slowing the laser's movement. This can happen several times during the suppression. It's weakest to black damage, has normal resistance to pale, and is quite resistant to white. It's most resistant to red. When the second laser reaches its original position, the lasers will stop functioning for a time before activating again. It takes a lot of beating, but it is possible to defeat. Especially if dealt with right. And this is the most dangerous of the ordeals. Created to kill off a lot of employees once the lasers are deployed. The best thing to do is to attack it from the left rather than the right, as it buys the most time before the laser approaches. And once it gets too close, it's recommended to back away to the elevator shaft so that the laser can be avoided, as it's passing in between the doorways. And then once it's passed by, the agents can be sent back to the Green Midnight to finish the job. Although, I recommend not using short-range weapons like the King of Greed Ego. Finally, we have the Violet Midnight, also known as the God Delusion. Sounds like the title of a book. When this event starts, a message appears saying, "We try to accept it endlessly. We wanted to understand them in our head, whatever the consequences." And then 4 stone shrines, or group of tombstones. They're also similar to an altar. Well, whatever they're called, each one has different colours and spawn in random hallways in the facility. One red, one white, one black or purple, and another pale or blue. Red has claws. White has tentacles. Me, it's another hentai monolith. One has spiky protrusions, and the pale has eyes of Sauron. And attacking with the same damage type will heal them. And every time 25% of their maximum HP is depleted, they will attack with something stronger. Portals that have more of the same attack types. Red has claws which smash in. Purple has protrusions that penetrate. White has more tentacles. And pale has eyes of Sauron, which can attack... Oh, where did they get these from? Middle Earth? When one is destroyed, that attack method won't appear any longer. The ordeal ends when all the shrines are destroyed. Now, this can be difficult if it's not managed that well, especially if there are any other abnormalities which don't like being ignored. Right, now that I've got the ordeals that the facility goes through each day, let's move on to the lower layer, with a couple that are more personal to a certain individual. Until next time, hail the rabbit!